right, guys, it's Don Ford here from Progressive Insider and our long series of interviews of candidates. Let's say the Democratic leadership has failed us, and these are the people trying to replace them. Melanie Dorigo, running in New York's 3rd District, is here with me today. How are you doing today, Melanie?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you. So New York's 3rd District. When people think of New York, I think it's a big, giant misconception. They think of the city or they think of upstate, and there's really not a lot of in between. But it turns out it's a vast geographical region, which your district happens to be in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your district?
Absolutely. So New York's 3rd District spans 3 counties, so it's pretty unique in that sense. Northeastern Queens, Northern Nassau County, and then a significant chunk of Northern and a little bit of Mid-Suffolk County as well. So part of the district is technically in New York City in the county of Queens. And then we go suburbs, and the further out we go into Suffolk County, there are even some farms. So geographically, it's very diverse. This is, if you've ever read The Great Gatsby, this is the region set in that whole story. So we certainly have this, the Gold Coast of Long Island. We have some enormous mansions, and we have communities with 6 families living in the same home. So it's extremely diverse. It has one of the largest wealth income gaps in the country, and it's one of the wealthiest districts in the country.
Do you think that there's a lot of separation in your communication between the two groups, or are you able to find a message that sort of works with both communities?
Yeah, interestingly, we are able to find a message that works with all communities. I think there's something about New Yorkers where they're smart and they're direct and they want things that make sense. And I think, like most people, we want the benefits that we want, and we don't want to pay a lot for them, right? So I think, the conversations that we're having right now, and we're talking to all Democrats right now because this is a primary. And I think what we find are that there are these party loyalist Democrats where they just vote and toe the party line. There's the activists in the grassroots community that's pushing to change that and pushing against that. And then there's a large swath of people in the middle that are maybe not as keyed in and maybe not paying attention. So when their representative tells them things like, healthcare is a human right, they think that their representative is fighting for healthcare until, someone communicates with them and say, well, actually, this is how your rep voted. So it's really been a battle to reach folks and educate folks. And what I find by and large is it isn't this conversation or this debate about conservative Dems versus activists. It's really educating everybody in the middle who thinks and believes that their representative is really representing democratic values, which unfortunately in my district hasn't been the case, which is why I'm running for Congress.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Why are you running for Congress? And evidently you feel that your current representation isn't really giving you the feeling of it represents even you, let alone everybody else.
Absolutely. And as I said, there's a misconception that just because someone has a D next to their name, that they're fighting for democratic values. My opponent is the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is essentially a group of conservative Democrats that caucus with Republicans. Under a Trump administration, I don't even understand the logic there. When so many of us worked so hard to flip the House in 2018, the first thing you decide to do is caucus with Republicans. This is the group that was instrumental in holding up Nancy Pelosi's speakership after we had flipped the House. And they basically instituted a rules change that would weaken Democratic power, if you can believe it, and strengthen the GOP's power. So in terms of bringing bills to the floor. So it's really egregious, but it gets really wonky. He also broke with the party to support ICE. He rolled back Dodd-Frank and banking regulations. He was one of the last Democrats to the table to support impeachment. When he finally did, he was quoted in our local paper saying he hoped for a quick trial with no witnesses. And I wish I could tell you that that's where it ends, but it doesn't. He was the Democrat that hosted and chaired the National Prayer Breakfast, which sounds like a lovely event, except it's a huge pay-to-play event in Washington. And it's funded by the Fellowship, which is a dark money group that pushes anti-LGBTQ legislation globally. And you probably saw the headlines of Trump at a podium shaking a newspaper that said acquitted as he was attacking Democrats. That was that breakfast. It happened to be the day after the Senate acquitted him. And my opponent was right on stage with him, shaking his hand and sitting on the dais right next to Mike Pence. So no, I don't think he is fighting for democratic values. And, we can talk more about the issues, but just about on every single one, he goes against what I believe are the tenets of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, he's really keeping that resist movement alive, I can see. Yeah, wow. Well, I think this is why we try to do these interviews with everybody and have these discussions on what is happening and how it's going on, because I didn't know any of this. I didn't know what you're saying right now, and this seems like kind of a big deal. I tend to know things, so you're telling me right now it's kind of shocking, and clearly you had to say it a whole bunch of times because you said it so well and eloquently, because that's a real problem. That is not, because we have this talk in the Midwest, especially, where the inter-party process has been taken over by Republicans. And so there's the whole one-party, two-party conversation where do we really have two parties? And, there's been a lot of moves, especially since Trump took office, where Democrats, progressives have been pushing for these seats all over the country. But at the same time, we're seeing these blue dogs, we used to call them, even though it's a very specific term, that basically were giving the Republicans everything they wanted since the Bush years, since before that, since going way back. I think it's when Clinton lost control of the Congress, right? So that when that really started, it was Reagan. These guys are super old. But point being is that we really need people like you, Melanie. We really need people like you in there, because something tells me you wouldn't be on that dais shaking hands with Mike Pence.
Nope. I would not. That's certainly not the plan. The plan is to win and continue to build coalitions within Congress and give a voice to, what we call now, I suppose, progressive democratic issues. But I think if we really are honest with ourselves, what we're fighting for in the progressive movement really is what it used to mean to be a Democrat, right? We wanted to provide health care for folks. We wanted a woman to have bodily autonomy, and it was her right to choose and hers alone, right? And for some reason, we have Democrats that are really going further right on that issue, which I think as a woman is just completely unacceptable. We were the party that championed immigrants, and we were the party that protected the middle class, not gave endless amounts of corporate welfare at the expense of middle class families. So now these ideas are considered progressive, and some may even say radical, but really it's just a return to who we are, I think.
I agree. I think that this is much more middle of the road than people realize, because I think that far left has nationalized everything, which I would like to point out to our audience. I stand firmly behind the nationalization of Amazon, so let's all get on that. But Melanie, we're talking about this sort of stuff and what's going on, and you are in New York State, New York City, and you are the hardest hit COVID region. And I know I'm going to change. We're going to take a little bit of a twist, because it's impossible to talk to candidates without talking about how the crisis has affected their ability to campaign, solutions they're finding to get through that process, because we're going to have to develop a whole new system there's been a lot of talk about protocols for eventual canvassing and all that, which I don't think can happen safely this election cycle at all. But what are some of the ways that it's affected you, and what have you guys been doing to keep getting the word out and show people you're there for them?
Yeah, so I will say that, so as I said, part of my district is in Queens. A neighboring district is the hardest hit place in the entire country. Like the epicenter of the epicenter. Obviously, New York City got hit really hard. Nassau County and then Suffolk County were like 2 and 3 in the nation. And so what we did initially was transition our operation. We were knocking over, thousands of doors each week. But now we were at a point where our neighbors were getting sick. Our undocumented families were not able to get food. They were fired from their jobs. They were afraid to go to food banks. So we've reoperationalized. We started doing outreach checks to senior citizens, wellness checks to make sure they were okay. And sometimes folks just wanted a person on the other end of the phone, just to say hello. And the mental health capacity of it is also, quite serious. We started collecting food. We've partnered with community groups and activist and grassroots groups all over the district. We have 10 food, like large 40 to 50 pound bins. And we've been collecting food and partnering with different organizations to make sure that, people everywhere can be fed. It's been a challenge. We've had to completely, from the campaign side, transition from the physical space to the online realm, right? So it's a lot of phone calls, texting, virtual events, virtual town halls. And thankfully, we were one of the early campaigns to jump on that. And so we did get a lot of following early. But now, as you are probably acutely aware, everyone is doing everything online right now. So it's getting harder to break through the noise. You know, as a grassroots campaign, typically your canvassing operation is one of your strengths. And, you know, we started canvassing in October, and folks were looking at us and telling us we were crazy, that what were we doing? And now thankfully, you know, thank goodness we were out canvassing early, because we wouldn't have reached as many voters as we did. So, you know, it's just been, you know, from a campaign side, completely different. Any campaign cycle is insane. This one is really one for the books. But more so, you know, we've just really been focused on making sure that people are safe and they're healthy. Unfortunately, you know, most of the New York delegation, when I say most, I mean really all except for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, really didn't do anything to fight for New York. You know, they passed these bills with zero accountability. Funding went to other states that had barely had any infection, or certainly very low infection rates, whereas ours was skyrocketing. And now we see our opponents, and certainly my opponent, gaslighting everyone, saying that he's fighting for New York, that he's secured all this. He didn't do any of that. He's been showing up for photo ops in our district and taking pictures at a food bank and then leaving. And then they call us and they say, can you bring us food? Can you help? Tom Suozzi showed up and he left and he didn't do anything. And I think it, you know, it really speaks to, you know, why someone is in this. Like, you're either in office to serve, or you're in there for, I don't know if it's power or ego or what. I just am of the belief that if you do not want to serve, then you have no business running for office.
Yeah, that's actually that's a really good point. I think a candidate said to me the other day, the balance of passion and courage, or understood kindness and courage is what it was, and how there are too many people that lead with all the courage. You end up in this egotistical place. They lead with too much kindness. They end up being not strong enough, one could say. I'm sure there's a better phrasing for that. And it's about that balance in between, where you're doing for the right reasons, that you balance all these ideas, that you're able to move forward and be effective, because you also take that balance into Congress with you, which is an extremely unbalanced place. And we've seen some very exceptional women excel recently, mainly because they just made their own rules when it was time. They found that balance. So, you know, there's some real truth in what you're saying, because it's not just, to everyone watching this, it's not just, you know, an idea. It's a psychological approach to how you look at life. And so I'm really happy to hear that from you, Melanie, and I'm happy to hear that you were able to get out there campaigning early. And everyone who's watching this, please, if you're thinking about campaigning, you're thinking about getting involved, start early. And always start by talking to your family first. Just putting that out there. Always start with your family first. You were saying you have 3 young children. How are they handling the campaign life?
You know, my children are fairly, I think they're used to it. You know, my kids are seasoned canvassers from campaigns that I either ran or volunteered on. You know, they've come to many a protest. I'm very proud. My oldest is 9. My middle child is 5, and my son is 3. And my 2 daughters, they know who their assembly person is. They know who their state senator is. They know who their senators are on the federal level. And of course, they certainly know who their representative is. So they're pretty woke kids. And, you know, we had a conversation about running and what it would mean, and how it would mean that I would have to be in DC. And, you know, they were really excited, because what I hope to do when I win is really try to expand that space for mothers in Congress. Right now, only 5% of Congress is comprised of mothers. And I think that's because childcare primarily falls on the woman, you know. And so if we can figure out a way to balance it, to be able to bring our kids and have them exist in both places, I think we can make it easier for more moms to run for Congress. And I think that's what we need. You know, moms are the ones typically in communities who are building communities. They're running the school systems. They're running the community events. And that is just, it's why people move to certain places, right? They want to see what the community is like. And typically it's the women of the community who are really the builders. So I think if we could have more women in mom, we would solve a lot more problems.
I totally agree with you. I had a hard time not laughing in the middle of that, because I realized something you said was so true. When you're like, women literally build society. I mean, like, literally. And I think that is something that isn't as a concept. I mean, as it was said to me right now, I mean, it seems like it's obvious, but you're still like, no. Like dropping a brick, but it's a baby. And that's sort of like, you got to put that into perspective, because how important it is to have that perspective at the forefront, making decisions for what is right and what is not, because there's a whole end of perspective that I will never understand that. I mean, I have a lot of plants and I get very excited when they grow a little bit. I'm like, oh, I run life. And my wife looks at me and she's like, I don't care. And I'm like, that's because you can make babies, go away. And so there is something beautiful to say about that idea, and that 5% is far, far too low. I don't think it's reasonable to be like 50%. I do think it should be a balance of women, but not every woman, if they don't want to have children, that's their choice. But I think that we should be in a position where it's lots of mothers in there and lots of balance. What's that? Maybe this is just what's wrong the whole time, Melanie.
Well, we need more women in general. We need more diversity in general. But to only have 5% of mothers, it's not working. It's not working for us. It's not working for Americans. It's not working for the people who live here. And I would say, like, I think a large part of the reason we don't see progress in Congress is because of the influence of corporate money in politics. I think it's the biggest impediment to progress. And that's another thing. My opponent takes millions of dollars in corporate PAC money. And what we have seen, and we see this on both sides of the aisle, we have seen that when politicians get compromised, they start legislating for their donors. They don't legislate for us. And we've just moved too far in that direction, which is why I'm so encouraged to see all of these amazing candidates running all over the country, rejecting corporate PAC money, as I am, and standing up and saying, no, we're going to be beholden to our district. We're going to be beholden to the people. We're not going to be beholden to corporate donors. I mean, you brought up COVID. Look at these stimulus packages. My goodness, bailout after bailout after bailout to all of these corporations. And what did Americans get? Some Americans, $1,200. In my district, that won't even cover your rent or your mortgage payment in a month. So, you can really see where Congress has been prioritizing. And now it's this fifth bill where they're finally going to be potentially giving some money to the states. And our state could really use some money. We got hit so hard, but it's likely not going to pass the Senate. And even if it does, I mean, you probably are aware of this. And this to me is like, wow, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And you have like Rep. Jayapal saying, let's provide healthcare to everybody during this pandemic. That seems very reasonable in a global pandemic. In come the insurance lobbyists with a plan to Nancy Pelosi. Well, instead of doing that, how about you subsidize COBRA payments? And that's what went in the bill. That's what's in the HEROES Act, subsidizing COBRA payments to those that lost their jobs. So forget those contract workers, forget those freelance workers, of which there are many in my district. Forget those essential workers who probably can't afford insurance because minimum wage jobs aren't enough to feed their families. What about all those folks? So I think it really shows the priorities of Congress right now, and it's frankly sickening, and I think they should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this whole propping up capitalism thing has gone up a little too far. Would you like to hear what I think is going to happen after we do a lot of COVID stuff? I'll give you a little bit. This is what I think is going to happen. I think basically they're going to linger on this bill. They're not going to vote no on it right away. If the Senate is already broken for Congress, broken for break, whatever you want to call it, broken for Congress, broken for break. And so that's an issue. But I think they're going to sit on it and they're going to reopen and they're going to see how bad it is. And then when they realize how bad we all knew it was going to be the whole time, then they're going to step up at like the end of June. They're going to give us another $1,200 payment and extend the CARE Act, thinking that's going to be a stop. But that was the stopgap we needed 2 months ago after the first one. Like, we should have been dishing out the second $1,200 payment before we were even had them distributed. And then now they're going to do, I think we'll have UBI by October.
I don't know. I would have thought, right, or a Congress that governing morally would have put it into place, back in April, not in October. It's really astounding. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if you want to contain the virus, you have to keep people home. You keep people home by making sure they can afford to live and providing healthcare if they're sick so that they don't have to worry about not being able to afford their medical bills. And, we have just seen the priorities completely flipped. No problem. billions of dollars to corporations. You know, even these small business programs, the Paycheck Protection Program was ravaged by larger companies. The Main Street Lending Protection Program. Did you know that there was a loophole in there for yacht companies and private jet companies to access money? I mean, you can't make this up. You know, you couldn't even make this up. It's unbelievable. That's where their priorities are, but those are hidden. You know, those are hidden letters to the Fed and all these additional changes. But listen, if you're in Congress, you have to push back against that. You have to fight. You have to build those coalitions and say, no, this is the people. This is the people's house, right? That's what the House of Representatives. That's what it was all about, always from the beginning. That's supposed to be the people's house. So if that is true, why are they fighting for corporations? You know, you need to fight for people.
Yeah, I think it's because we redefined what people were a little bit ago, unfortunately, and also it has a lot to say with that we're still dealing with old white rich men being the only people. Like, and I think that there's some of these crusty guys who've been in there so long. They've been in there since that was the thing. I mean, some of these guys have been around. Well, at least, I mean, we know for a fact, was it Strom Thurmond or whatever? I mean, he had been around for seeing everything before he passed. And a lot of these guys worked with him. And it's all this same community we're trying to change. It's like the systemic racism and sexism in our government that is really happening. And the problem is you get back into this whole, well, they have all the money too. And you're like, oh, well, we need a lot of sweat equity. So Melanie, on that note, how can people get involved with your campaign? What can they do? I know phone banking, it sounds like the setup. Do you have text banking, anything like that? What's your website link?
Yeah. Sure. So the website is Darrigo 2020. So DARRIGO 2020.com. You can sign up there to volunteer. I'll also send you a sheet to sign up for phone bank. We do have text banking, but honestly, what we really need are phone bankers. We need to get that vote out in a really big way. If anyone can chip in, our costs have really exploded because we have to shift. We lost our door knocking game. So it's expensive to make calls. It's expensive to do mass text. It's expensive, really expensive to mail things. So, you know, even a $5 donation goes a really long way for us. And we really could just use the support. And if none of that works for you, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Darrigo for Congress or on Twitter at Darrigo Melanie. Give us a like, share out our message, because if you can't afford to donate $5 or you can't phone back, maybe one of your friends can. And, you know, we could really, truly use all the help. You know, we're going up against a Democrat who's been very cozy with Trump, who I said caucuses with Republicans. He supported the Hyde Amendment. So for your viewers probably know, the Hyde Amendment is an amendment that blocks federal funding for poor women to access abortion. It disproportionately affects women of low income, women of color, veterans. Again, like, it's just mind-blowing how Democrats could continue to support that amendment. He hasn't been fighting for immigrants. He hasn't been fighting for us, you know, the middle class. And he supports a public option, which would leave millions of people without health care. And it's time for a change. And so I'm stepping up, and I hope that you'll support me. And thank you so much for, you know, again, for having me and letting me share a little bit more about my platform.
Hey, Melanie, you know, we've been doing these longer videos, but I don't want to keep you away from your campaign. I think it's really important that people get involved and stay involved. The New York election's a little further out from the June 2nd elections, but that doesn't mean it's not right around the corner. And I know that right now we're just a few days away. When this video actually goes live, it's going to be even closer to June 2nd. And that puts their race, which is June 23rd, 20th, what is it?
It is June 23rd, but we are pushing folks to vote by absentee ballot this year. So it's very likely that the first wave of ballots will start arriving probably this coming week. So that's what's so tricky and hard to judge about New York this year, because we do expect the majority of folks to vote by absentee ballot, and it will be coming in waves. So we need to really get as many people reaching out as early as possible, so, you know, we don't miss someone who accidentally votes for someone else.
Oh, so in this case, this election, you're basically saying, and this has been true actually in every state we've noticed, that you're saying this election is not on election day. It's really the week before election day, because you have to get the week of post to get there. There's no drop off, right? You have to mail it.
Well, no, not in New York, actually, because of the way our state constitution is set up. We will still have early voting. You can still go to the polls. The polls are still open on Election Day, June 23rd. But we've been pushing folks not to go to the polls, to just sign up, for an absentee ballot and vote that way, because we believe that it's safer. We've seen what's happened in other states, and we certainly don't want to put anyone at risk.
I just mean, and thank you for that, by the way. We don't want to put anyone at risk, but the absentee ballot has to be sent back about a week before. So
well, it has to be requested. You can send it back, I think, the day before the election, actually, but it has to be requested by June 16th. So, but because, it's essentially going to be on an ongoing rolling basis, voting's going to be happening all month, essentially.
Interesting. Wow. And that makes phone banking even more important, because you're not just calling people to say, hey, look for this thing in a couple of months, and no, right now, go do this. Right. And that is the best kind of phone banking you can do. Did you not like that I tapped on the thing? I'm sorry. I think she thought somebody was on. Rosie's here, everybody. She's just hiding out. It's very hot. Regular guest on the show. So, so Melanie, I think that's it for us. I think we're going to cut it here. I think that you have a lot going for you in this campaign. You need more support. You need more people. You need people to step up and do something, like I said, to go tell those voters right now, go get your absentee ballots, get prepared, look for them in the mail, request whatever you're going to do, jump through whatever hoop you're going to have to jump through, because we don't get a lot of chance to change the system. And the incoming class of Congress is going to be talking about what we're doing in these situations. And I think that something you said is very telling about the stimulus bills is that we are not in a stimulus phase yet. We are in a relief phase, and no one is talking about relief bills. We've had one relief bill. It's $1,200. They're talking about a second relief bill, but it's our fifth payout to anyone who has their hand out. So I think it's really important we get involved with candidates like Melanie's here, and that's Dorigo, like Dorito, but without the T. So yeah, yeah, it's good for remember. There's a lot of candidates going on. You got to remember that name. So write it down, get involved. Hopefully there'll be a link in the comments. Melanie, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. You really spoke very well about your issues. Normally I talk a lot more. So thank you for saving everyone that trouble.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. So that's it for us. I've been Don Ford. Okay. This has been Progressive Insider. Carrie's been hiding out. She's here too. So we'll be back. Thank you for watching.